Hey everyone, how's it going? Stammer6 here with a guide for anyone who wants to give League of Legends a shot. This guide's going to assume that you're entirely unfamiliar with the multiplayer online battle arena genre of games, but have at least played through the tutorial to understand the basics such as moving and attacking. In this guide, I'd like to cover things such as phases of the game, trading damage, last hitting minions, and learning new champions. Let's start with the phases of the game. A single match of League of Legends is typically divided into three phases: the laning phase, or early game, the mid-game phase, and the late game phase. Each of these becomes more crucial, and each will impact how well you and your team transition from one to the next. Winning one phase will gain you an advantage in the next, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll win the next phase automatically. Many characters, and indeed many players, specialize in certain phases. The ultimate objective of the game is to get to and destroy the enemy nexus. However, it remains invulnerable until you've destroyed all of the structures in at least one enemy lane. The laning phase starts out slow. Each player begins the game by going to the lane which they pick during champion select. Most champions specialize in one or two positions and typically balances a team out between different types of characters. Staying in your lane is crucial to your success, as leaving your lane will put you behind in experience points and gold during the phase where every little bit counts towards a growing advantage. Your goal in this early phase is to rack up as much gold as you can while disrupting your laning opponent's gold as much as you can. Once the lane loses an outer turret, the player who won the lane will often begin roaming a lot to help his or her allies. This is when the transition to mid-game happens, and is often when you'll see many smaller skirmishes with 3 to 4 players from each team clashing at a time. Mid-game is all about maximizing objectives such as dragon and enemy towers. The late-game phase is where mistakes are the most dire. You need to be grouped up at all times, since losing even a single ally is enough to give the enemy team enough of an advantage to take many objectives. Objectives fall fast, respawn timers are long, and players are nearing their full builds. This is also where team fights involving all 10 players are most likely to happen, and a total loss of all 5 players is likely to end in the other team winning. Trading is a very important part of the earlier phases of the game. In short, a trade is a brief exchange where players try to maximize their damage output on an opponent while taking as little damage as possible in return. This is accomplished by using your champion's abilities to their maximum effects and retreating before your opponent can do the same. You don't want to stick around for too long. First of all, it means you're opening yourself to your opponent flinging their own abilities back at you and making the trade minimal or negative. Secondly, enemy minion and tower damage adds up quickly and will cause you to lose a fight if you overextend for too long. For some champions, it's ideal to simply throw one long-ranged ability to poke the enemy and whittle them down. Ziggs has a range to avoid retaliation altogether, so he wants to throw bombs from a safe distance. However, if he doesn't play safe against the shorter-ranged enemy Yasuo and respect his strength and abilities, Yasuo can commit to jumping in and dealing even more damage to Ziggs. Just remember that if you aren't going in for the kill, maximize your trade by retreating as soon as possible. Remember that a trade does not require you to get a kill. Most often you'll just be whittling your opponent down until they're either forced to retreat back to base, or they'll be threatened by your ability to kill them. You can win a lot of games without any kills at all by simply forcing your opponent back a lot and causing them to miss gold and experience from minions. Also, always try to keep in mind the cooldowns of your abilities, indicated by the little timer on each ability's icon after use. Try to learn how often you can maximize a trade. Scoring the final blow on a minion will earn you the gold for its death. Wait for its health to drop close to death and then right-click on it to finish it off. It takes a lot of practice, but you'll get better at it over time. This is the most reliable way to earn gold in the game to spend on items with which to upgrade your champion. You can tell how many minions you've slain by the number next to your KDA. On average, every 15 or so minions you kill is roughly the equivalent to getting a champion kill. With that said, if you're playing a champion with a weak ability to trade in the earlier phases of the game, you should focus on last hitting safely rather than trying to win unwinnable trades. Keep in mind that the melee minions are worth more gold than the ranged caster minions, and the siege minions are worth even more gold than that. Always try to get the siege minion whenever he shows up. At the start of every game, you have a little bit of gold to start with which to buy some items. Ideal starting items for most champions include Doran's items. Doran's Shield for melee fighters and tanks, Doran's Blade for physical attackers, and Doran's Rings for magical champions. There should also be enough gold left over to buy 1 or 2 potions. It's important to note that Doran's items are all very powerful and totally worth their gold value, but become very worthless towards the end of the game, so don't buy too many of them. All players may also pick a trinket for free, either the Warding Totem, Sweeping Lens, or Scrying Orb. Until you get more familiar with player versus player, it may be best to stick with a Warding Totem. You should also spend any gold you've earned anytime you return to base, whether it's because you've recalled or because you were slain. Until you become more comfortable with the game, be sure to follow the items the game recommends for you to build for your champion. Click on an item to see how to make it and purchase components for the item which you can afford. If you have enough gold, buy a health potion or 2 so you can stay in lane longer and earn more gold before the next time you return to base. Even though the recommended items may not always be the best picks, it's a good place to start until you become more experienced. Every champion is different, and it's important to figure out what your champion is capable of. There are many different ways to classify a champion. For one, their attack range. Some champions are classified as melee champions, meaning they need to be up close and personal to perform basic attacks. A champion, such as Darius, is vulnerable to harassment and being the subject of kiting, but if he gets close, he's a lot stronger than any ranged counterparts. Ranged champions are typically much more fragile, but make up for it in safety. Caitlyn, for example, has long-ranged basic attacks and can usually attack an enemy without taking any damage in return. Other champions, like Gnar and Kayle, have both melee and ranged physical attacks, depending on the situation. Every champion can also be distinguished by their damage type. Some champions focus on physical damage, which is increased with the attack damage stat, and mitigated with armor. All champions' basic attacks are increased with attack damage, but not all of them rely solely on their basic attacks. Many champions dish out primarily magic damage, which is typically increased with ability power and mitigated with magic resistance. Each champion has a unique passive ability that's permanently in use and typically has little interaction, by which I mean you don't need to level it up or activate it. Each champion also has 3 regular abilities that you may acquire and upgrade as your champion levels throughout a game. These are your Q, W, and E abilities. At champion level 6, you may unlock your 4th ability. This is your R ability and is referred to as your champion's ultimate. This usually has a long cooldown, but wildly turns the tables in a fight if used properly. Some champions are unique and may start with their R ability, but in this case it's typically a transformation or an augment rather than an actual ultimate. Game uses algorithms to calculate how steep a champion's learning curve is. You can view this difficulty at any time by examining each champion. No champion is so difficult that you need to be a pro to figure him out, but you'll usually be a lot more successful using an easier champion for the first few times rather than a harder champion. I'll give a few examples of easy-to-learn champions for each of the game's various roles. Garen is arguably the easiest tank to learn. He's naturally very durable, has no mana bar to worry about, and all of his abilities are pretty straightforward. You can maximize trades with him by activating Q, clicking it on your enemy, then using E and W as you run away. When the enemy gets low enough, your ultimate is a surefire way to finish them off. Other easy tanks to learn include Amumu, Maokai, and Malphite. If support is more your thing, I would recommend Taric. He's the champion I learned the role on because of his versatility. His kit is incredibly straightforward and synergizes well with having a partner to lane with, and since he doesn't scale well, you can leave the last hitting to your partner. The best way to trade enemies is to stun them with your E, then run up and use your W to shred the enemy's armor so your marksman partner can deal damage. Finally, retreat and use Q on your ally to heal both of you at the same time. Other newcomer-friendly supports include Soraka and Sona. Caitlyn is a fun and satisfying marksman to use. Remember, marksmen are glass cannons, meaning you want to play safe, and Caitlyn is about as safe as you can get. She has the longest basic attack range in the game, meaning it's easy to last hit from a safe distance. Her passive gives her strong trading power, Q is a strong poking and wave clearing tool, W is a fun little trap, and E is a safe escape mechanism. If you get an enemy low enough health, you can use your ultimate to guarantee a kill secure. Misfortune, Lucian, and Graves are also reasonably easy to learn with. For learning mages, it's really hard to go wrong with Brand. He's fairly simple to use, yet teaches you a lot about how to combo your spells and how to use various types of abilities. His passive deals burning damage after landing a spell, and any following spells you hit the enemy with gain a bonus effect. Hitting Q while they're burning will stun them, W will deal bonus damage, and E will spread into an area. Your ultimate is a satisfying damage spell that bounces between its targets to deal catastrophic damage. Other easier mages include Morgana, Lysandra, Annie, and Vel'Koz. Pantheon is my recommended fighter. His abilities are pretty simple, yet very effective. Your Q is a targeted poking tool, and once the enemy gets low enough, you can combo a WEQ to finish them off. His ultimate is a lot of fun as well, jumping halfway across the map to man-drop onto an enemy, where you can then combo WEQ into a powerful 4-hit combo. Fighter is an easy role in general to learn, and other easy champions to learn the role can include Aatrox, Riven, Darius, Renekton, Gangplank, Xin Zhao, Shyvana, and Tryndamere. My last topic is on options. Before you get too comfortable with the default settings, you may want to change some things and adjust to them as early as you can. For one, I'd highly recommend turning the lock screen off and learning how to play without the screen always over your character. Trust me when I say it'll benefit you a lot in the long term when you can see everything that's happening in the game at the same time. There's also an intermediate setting that lets you move the screen around a little bit while your character is always on the screen too. When you become more comfortable with a champion's ability ranges, try switching to Smart Cast. Not only will this allow you to combo your abilities faster, but I find it makes me a lot more accurate as well. Lastly, consider turning colorblind mode on, as it makes both teams considerably easier to distinguish and also changes your own health bar color so you can tell yourself apart in a heated clusterfuck teamfight. I hope this video helps. Good luck and have fun!